Welcome to our latest episode, episode 4 of ThreatCon 1, the place to be to talk about emerging cyber threats that matter with the people who matter. Our guest today is Tod Beardsley, Vice President of Security Research at RunZero. Welcome, Tod.
Hello, Tom. Nice to see you again.
It is great to see you. And of course,
what's up, Con?
We have Patrick, my co-host for our podcast. As if we're not on enough calls together, Patrick, right. During the week. But this is where we can have a lot of fun. But Tod, right. Welcome. It's great to see you. I have to say it was awesome meeting you. I'm so glad we kept in touch. And I'm a terrible golfer. Mm-hmm. I got to experience your first golf experience.
That was the first. So back in ThreatCon 1 in wherever we were, Reston, Virginia.
Reston.
That was the first time I have played 18 holes of golf. I communicated my body between 18 holes of golf. I swung maybe, 10 times, 12 times, something like that. And then I was clearly dragging the team down. So
I love it.
But it was fun.
You nailed some great putts, and I actually still owe you $10.02 from the right, yeah. $40.08 third place finish that we got.
Nice.
Wonderful.
I'll get your Venmo and we'll square up. Well, listen, it's great to have you here today. We're super pumped to have a really fun discussion. Give us an idea of like your average day, the things that get you excited about cyber, the things that don't get you excited about cyber, and give us a little background on kind of like the things that you're up to. Sure.
So I've been like an InfoSec communicator for as long as I can remember. I started a hacker bulletin board system running World War IV BBS back in, 1988. So the late 20th century, I've been at this, and that was super fun. I met a bunch of people online. It ended up turning into like something like 10 years later. I met one of the users I had, and they were running a little consultancy, and they're like, "Oh, hey, are you?" And I said, "Yeah, are you?" And then we figured out who we were, and then that's when I started working with them. I've been doing IT stuff, like real IT, not just InfoSec, like actually getting, things to talk to each other, right. Since 1996 or 7 or so. I've worked at Dell and Westinghouse and the U.S. government, and Rapid7, a couple other places in there. And now I'm at RunZero, and RunZero is super fun. It's the third time I think I've worked with legendary hacker H.D. Moore, and every day is exciting with that guy around. It's pretty fun. The people at the company, of course, are the thing that make the company fun. We're very into work from home. We have like built an entire corporate culture around this. There's no threat of like this return to office nonsense. I mean, we're all knowledge workers. We can do this like literally anywhere on the planet, and so we do. We're mostly U.S. We're mostly U.S. And there's a plurality here in Austin, Texas, of folks who work here, but we're really spread out all over the place. So, what gets me excited about cybersecurity is, I'm getting kind of graybeard, and so I've kind of seen it all before, and so I'm often.
Are you a curmudgeon now?
I'm not a curmudgeon yet. I am very optimistic about people for some, like maybe baselessly so, but I think that people really do want to do the right thing. People don't go out of their way to have bad security. I'm always like looking into like, why do people do the wrong thing like consistently, and how do we get them to do the right thing in a way that's not like really heavy-handed or like telling them no all the time? Like, how do we enable people to have at least enough security to do the things that they want to do, right? Because this is the truism about the internet. It is the internet, like as a technology. Think of it as like one blob of tech, right? It is barely secure enough for most people most of the time,
right?
Like, and that is true because, and it's obviously true. Like we're soaking in it, like right now, right? Like, and we're doing the thing. If it was as insecure as security people like Patrick and I and you and everybody else who probably listens to this, like it should be falling over every 5 minutes. Like we should not be able to get through an hour-long, remote podcast recording from 3 different locations, right? But we can, because it is barely secure enough for that kind of thing for us.
Oh, I thought that was thanks to UDP.
Also, UDP helped a lot. And that's the thing. It's like, and then of course we have the DNS system, which is all run on UDP. I am old enough to remember that we used to pass around host files to each other because we weren't really sure this whole DNS thing was going to work out. We knew IP addressing was solid, but this whole like name to IP address service that you would just go ask on the internet over UDP, which was nonsense. That didn't work out all the time. so we had backups of host files of like all the good mushes that we would log into to like pretend to be vampires and everything like that. So
I love it. Well, when you think about where like your trajectory in your careers has taken you and some of the cool things you've done, we certainly know that you spent some time at CISA.
I did.
And that is interesting probably to everybody listening to this discussion today. But, I think when you take a step back, like, CISA exists. We know what it exists for. They manage the CVE program. Give us an idea of like...
Yes. It's a little more nuanced.
Well, fund.
Yes.
I would say more fund the CVE program than... Sorry.
Right. So give us an idea of the things that you did at CISA. Mm-hmm. And then like where you kind of see... Like where CISA is at today with pretty big things. They have some significant responsibilities and roles to both the enterprise globally and to protecting national security. Give us an idea of some of the things that you did there, that you worked on perhaps, and we can kind of go from there.
So I was hired on at CISA after a long run at Rapid7, way too long for like someone in a tech career. I was at Rapid7 for like almost 15 years. Wow. And so then I jumped over to CISA, federal government, because I was hanging out with a lot of like policy people, and I was like going to DC maybe like once a quarter or so just to like talk to staffers on the Hill and do cyber policy stuff and all that. And so like it became, and I was hanging at ShmooCon and all that jazz, right? And so I got hired on at CISA to do basically vulnerability analysis. And so in that, I was eventually made section chief of vulnerability response. It's such a cool title. It's a very Tom Clancy title. Section chief of vulnerability management, responsible for the CVE, the Known Exploited Vulnerabilities List. And you have to pronounce it that way or else the acronym doesn't make sense. And the CVE was super fun to work on, as you know, no doubt know, with your other CVE. And it was funny because like when I got there, you guys were already doing, like, CVE was not new. It was like in its kind of like sophomore phase, right? And then you guys had started your own, and that was great. Like I actually really liked it because it put the pressure on of like, oh, so it's not just us looking at this stuff. It's like us and Vulncheck, which is so funny because it's like the United States federal government, which is trusted with, the world's currency reserve and like defending the Indian Ocean, also does this thing. And so does Vulncheck.
Who are we?
Right. Some startup somewhere doing it.
So it is interesting. Like we sold it commercially up until we made it public community. So like, my understanding, I wasn't here at that point, but like it was pre-CISA CVE. It was just that we sold it for money.
Yeah. And there were other outfits out there that were doing that kind of like vulnerability intelligence and exploit intelligence, right?
Yeah.
I think Vulncheck was innovative in that. It's like, oh, well, this is like actually really useful for everyone.
Yes.
It raises, it raises the a rising tide raises all boats. I can't say that.
And that was kind of the intention. It was kind of funny, but it's like, hey, like, oh, this is great. It's a free public good. Let's make ours a public good too. Maybe we have some terms and conditions that you asked about, but overall, it's like the intent is like get it for free, and whoever wants to incorporate it in their product, I think the only thing we ask for is that attribution.
I like the CVE, and I like the notion of known exploited vulnerability lists that like everybody knows are being exploited, because like that is like the rubber meets the road in like vulnerability research. It's like these are things that we know for sure that have like working exploits that somebody somewhere went out of their way to actually pull the trigger on, right? Like the Vulncheck Kev and the CISA Kev and any other like known exploited list is not just a copy paste of like everything that's in Metasploit, right? Or everything even that's in Nuclei, which is like the new hotness. They're the new Metasploit for sure. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of these exploits out there that honestly like nobody uses in an offensive like non-consensual way, you know what I mean? Like you can still use them. Like I think Metasploit's main purpose, I used to work on Metasploit by the way, and I think Metasploit's like main use is like I want to be able to illustrate this vulnerability and talk about this vulnerability and see how this vulnerability works so I can learn about other vulnerabilities, right? You know, so much of Metasploit is like, oh, this vulnerability smells like that one, so I'm just going to copy paste the module over, make like the 2 changes, and now it works, right? And that's really powerful, right? Especially for defenders, because now you can like record the attack in your own time. You can build a defense. You can look at IOCs or indicators of compromise, which are IOCs. You can build like firewall rules and intrusion detection system rules and all of this other stuff, all using this kind of like public knowledge, because the alternative is only bad guys get to know how to do this, right? Only spies, only criminals, and advanced persistent teens, only kids who stumble into it and then they don't tell anybody how to do it. So that's my pitch for, you know, open exploit research. And I got to do that for the U.S. government, which was rad. I think the biggest difference between CISA Kev and the Vulncheck Kev is like Vulncheck Kev has a constituency of people who opt into it, right? They, you know, when you flag something as like, hey, this is being exploited, you know, your customers and users get to see that, and then they decide, am I going to act on this or not?
Right.
CISA Kev is different because it has a binding operational directive 2201, that compels several agencies that you pay for with your tax dollars to stop what they're doing and fix this thing when we say it is being done, right? And so our penalty for being wrong, I feel like, is much higher than your penalty for being wrong. And so that's why things are slow to get on the Kev. I know Patrick is always complaining about how slow the Kev is.
Yeah,
nope, you fine. Always are. But that's why it's slow, right?
I agree with you. Like, we've taken the approach even with the evidence where it's like, well, here's the evidence.
And I'm not saying
like,
you want to be wrong. And I'm not saying you're sloppy. You're definitely not, right? But
no, yeah. I think a difference of approach, right? Which is like, to some extent, you accelerate speed, you get broader visibility, and genuinely most of these things are pretty bad. But still, tip of the spear, like you're talking about like one maybe 2% of vulnerabilities, right? I think this year we might be at like 2%. And so if you're gonna go fix something, it's like, yeah, you should probably go fix those things.
And that 2% figure, so what you're talking about is in the universe of CVE really identified vulnerabilities, only about 2% ever see any exploitation action.
Right.
And that percent, like if things keep going the way they're going, like that percentage will keep dropping as more CVEs are, you know, discovered, published, you know, and talked about, right? And so it's so funny to me that like there's so many people whose job it is, you know, often entry level or, you know, kind of early to mid career. Their job is counting CVEs in their environment. It's like, cool. So, you know, every 100 you count, you know, 1.5 like actually matter. And that's can be depressing. It's like, well, why did I even get into cybersecurity? I thought it was all like hacking and like latex bodysuits and skateboarding around and being rad. And it's like, that's only like the 10%, you know, sorry.
It's like 0.01% of us. Yeah, right. Very few.
Anyway, that was a long and rambling answer to what is it you say you do here. I really like vulnerability research. I like figuring out why people do the things they do. I just read a blog post the other day on like on my bafflement about passkeys, and so we could talk about that probably for the rest of the hour. But it's stuff like that. It's like where the thing you want people to do and the user experience you're implementing to get them to do it just doesn't match up with like the payoff. Like there's no there and the confusion that like a lot of people have about cybersecurity. I do try to make InfoSec boring and, you know, repeatable and not a cult and not alchemy, right? I want it like, don't get me wrong, I love being a wizard and everything, but I want everybody to be wizards and everybody should be like just out of the gate. And the fact is, today, you know, we have the best security we've ever had, right, on planet Earth. We have like an incredibly secure enclave that lives in our pockets called an iPhone, Android too, more or less, right? It's good enough, good enough for most people most of the time. I get mad at Android kind of on the regular. I also get mad at Apple for like not talking about their vulnerabilities in a sane and sensible way. But I do think that like the level of like just kind of innate basic default security is typically rising. This hopefully will continue even with AI.
Right. Right. That's another big topic. But like one thing that's interesting too that we could unpack a bit, Todd, would be if you look at the way that software is constructed, and if you look at like just this potentially dangerous reliance on open source software. And like I come from, before Vulncheck, I was at Finite State. So a lot of the things that we were doing were really focused on drilling down from a binary standpoint into the SBOM that sort of like exports out of a piece of firmware. And if you think about all these devices, I keep hearing one theme that keeps repeating itself when we're talking to prospects and customers of Vulncheck, certainly, are connected devices, like devices that are connected to an internal network, that are on the wire, and that just basically there's no way to really fix or patch because it's like hard to get to. If it's a big energy company, for example, think about the number of connected devices they have in some remote substation in Alaska, and it's like, you know, how do I get to that? And like just connected devices just seem like this like thing that nobody can solve, and it's not relegated necessarily to even just like, you know, some OT play either. It's something that just like keeps coming up, and it gets me back to thinking about software and just like, where are we going with software? When we had Jen Easterly on, we talked a little bit about just like the danger zone of software and just how it's just not something that is just like, security isn't even probably the third or fourth consideration when software is being built to build apps and basically compile connected devices. What's your thought on that?
I think, I mean, the vast majority, all complicated software is borrowing / stealing from open source work. And open source isn't free, right? Somebody's paying for that time somewhere. You know, this is the thing that like it's the dirty secret of open source is that there's usually somebody at some company is paying someone to write open source software. You know, and either directly or indirectly, right? Like I might be building some doodad, and like Nginx is my preferred web server of choice, but it's not doing exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to write a patch, and it's easier for me to just ship the patch than to like keep it to myself, right? And nobody at F5 paid me for this thing, but my company definitely did, right? To fix whatever this bug was, right? And so SBOM, you know, it's a noble intent. I considered Dr. Alan Friedman a very dear friend, and I think that like it is a path that's worth going down, right? Know what you have in your tech so you can do things like, you know, delineate vulnerabilities, know what's actually exposed, what's shipping in your library that might have a CVE attached to it, but like you're not actually exposing any of that functionality, so there's no way to get to it. You know, that kind of nuance tends to drop away when we talk about things like SBOM. There are ways to like note that in SBOM, but like, you know, Timmy's first SBOM won't have that nuance, right? They're saying like, look, we use Linux 246 or whatever, you know? It's like, all right, well, that is actually kind of meaningless because Linux changes every day. And so we live in this world where like software is assembled more than it's written typically. You know, the bugs tend to crop up in, you know, those touch points between components that, you know, maybe were never imagined to be working together in the past. And that's, you know, that's what keeps everything, you know, interesting. Keeps cybersecurity industry people employed. So I like that part.
Great. Sure does.
But I would say that like, you know, this notion of like, oh, Microsoft doesn't, you know, want to build secure software because it's like, you know, security is job 4 there. And it's like, and I don't think that's actually true. I think that like for the, you know, the giant tech companies, you know, your FANGs of the world, right? Like security does matter to them because they are a huge target, right?
Of course.
And so like I used to do like AMAs on Reddit of like, I'm a real life hacker, ask me anything, you know? And invariably for like, and I still get them now. Like I get DMs on Reddit. It's like, hey, can you help me hack my ex-girlfriend's Facebook? I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Can I use Metasploit to like hack my boyfriend's Insta? And I'm like, no, you can't. Actually, it's not great for that. There are other tools for that.
Sure.
Good luck, I guess.
Yeah.
You know. So like what security ultimately lets us do, security is an enabler because security gives you trust. And like nobody could figure out in 1996 how to pay for anything over the internet. And so everything was just default free. Right. And then somebody, the porn industry, figured out how to accept credit cards over the internet in a way that didn't immediately get you robbed. And right. So, and that was that like barely good enough, you know, innovation that got people to do commerce on the internet. And, you know, you can argue whether or not that was a good idea. I like the internet when it was just me and my nerd friends on Usenet, but that's fine. This internet's fine too.
It brings me back to LimeWire when like I'm like, oh wow, like I can get these like rare like Oasis bootlegs on LimeWire, and it only take me 4 hours to download this one concert. It was awesome.
I was going to mention something on the software side, right? Which is like the competing priorities. Like I agree with you that genuinely like these bigger companies definitely, especially tech companies, are trying to prioritize security. But also, I think there's the competing dynamics of building, you know, and having built product companies, me going on my 5th one of like ship the feature, right? Yep. And security is really secondary. And I truly believe like that often is the priority until you get to a certain maturity level, unless you are very security centric company. So I think in my experience is like we're security companies. So security is a pretty relatively strong priority.
I know, it's such a pain too, because it takes forever to ship anything when you work at a security company because there's always a security review.
But I do think a lot of times the dynamic is like, you know, I look at the medical device industry and talk to my friend and it's like, hey, I have a device and I need to get updates to it. So we need to build a connector so we can update it remotely. And there is no thought in mind on making sure that's secure. So you can just like throw VNC on there or RDP or something super simple and you get remote access and you can update the thing.
Well, the thing is that like today on, you know, building tech today is easier than ever for security reasons, right? Because like, you know, it used to be when you wanted to build a website, you had to like, you know, go and like write the HTML, right? And Notepad or whatever. And then there were frameworks. And then the frameworks got the right idea of like, hey, let's just make it really hard to do SQL injection by default. And so like when you're building like a, bog standard, you know, static website using like Hugo or Rails or something, even Rails for something like very dynamic, right? It's really hard to SQL inject yourself until you go out of your way and you use like the H control. And you know, it's like, no, I trust this data. This data is fine. They wouldn't just inject themselves. Why would they? And so like, but you do have to go out of your way. And I think that's true for like a lot of like just fundamental functions that we have today, especially around software updates, where like there is a pipeline now. It was madness when Google Chrome said, hey, we're just going to update your browser out from under you and you don't have to do anything. there was a cry from all InfoSec people everywhere. It was like, how could you possibly do that? Because you're going to crash the hell out of everything all the time, because the only thing we knew was Microsoft Internet Explorer and Firefox. And they crashed all the time when you applied patches. And Google's like, how about we don't patch and we do it silently? Or we don't crash you and we do it silently. And nobody believed they could do it, and then they did it. And now everybody does it, right? Like, it is rare to have a super crashy patch. He says on the, what a week after the Microsoft disaster that disables your keyboard and mouse. It's rare. It's still rare. It happened recently, but it's rare.
My question is, when are we going to see network devices follow that suit?
I'll tell you what, like, home routers are real uneven, and like home and Soho routers are real uneven about this. Some of them do it and some of them don't. Like enterprise routers like Cisco and Juniper and and all the rest, they don't auto update themselves ever. Like, that is, and it's a major undertaking. It's change control at that point. You got to open a ticket and have a window and like do the thing, and you're doing it at like 2 a.m. on a Tuesday or whatever, It's still really hard to update these things, which also, this is one of the things that drives me crazy about the InfoSec community. It's like, well, just patch your stuff. It's like, okay, just patch your stuff.
That's one step.
That works for your iPhone, and it even works for Microsoft Office. Like, rarely does that ever, like once a year, you'll have a bad patch for Office. It tends to work for Windows, tends to work for all the browsers. But when you're talking about edge gear, like your VPN concentrator, your firewall, your switch, your router, it's like, oh, just patch them. It's like, oh God, it's such a pain. It's such a pain to patch. And like, please give me just like a button that I can do, or give me like a configuration change that I can do to just like ignore this one. And this is the thing, a lot of security issues are these days in edge devices are on like these optional components that you don't actually need to like shove packets around. And so I don't know, like we should be doing a better job of highlighting those things, right? It's like, you can configure your way out of this without patching. And I understand, and I feel your pain, that patching is really hard for these things still. Someday in the future, I don't know, maybe AI will build a switch for us that we can just patch willy-nilly. Probably not.
Well, that's actually an interesting segue too, because like, we can't have any like cyber discussion anymore without saying the words AI. Where is I think one thing that'd be interesting to hear from you is your perspective on like, is this movement to incorporating AI into cyber, is this good or is this bad? Because we all know that attackers or really bad, right? I mean, like, because we know that attackers are using all sorts of automation and AI componentry to do their job easier. Is anything in AI making like cyber easier in your opinion?
I think that the things that we call AI, which isn't really AI, but it doesn't matter because it'll ruin everything anyway. To paraphrase Dr. Angela Collier, she's a physicist who talks about AI sometimes on YouTube at length. But I use AI for stuff. I use the things that we call AI, mostly LLMs, for stubbing out. For stubbing out some programming, chores that I have to do, right? I'll use AI for that. I intentionally use the crummier one for code gen. Like, I don't use Claude. I use a different one for code gen because it's worse, and so it never works quite right, and so I'm forced to read it, and therefore I have to know like how it's actually doing its thing.
Oh, interesting.
It's like that. It's like when you're if you play baseball and you're training on your weighted bat, right? So like when you swing the bat for real, like, oh, this is easy. I do that with my AI because I'm really worried about like the degenerative effects of like farming out knowledge work to, a machine that doesn't really get any better and doesn't learn anything and doesn't have like a subjective experience of the universe. I find it very creepy. And so I think that there are places where LLMs and neural nets and, fun like all the statistical stuff like really does help for security. Like, especially when you're doing like research work and you want to count things. Counting things is so hard. I'm really trying not to swear on your cool podcast. Counting things is really hard, much harder than people think. And so like whenever I'm counting something, like you almost always have to use some kind of statistical modeling, and boy, oh boy, LLMs are made of statistics. And so like those are two great tastes that taste great together. Now you do have to check, and you have to check the work all the time.
Yeah, that's the piece I think you're highlighting that I find the most is like, yeah, I had a new hire, someone you knew, and I was like, yeah, we can use AI to check this, but it's like, yeah, you like, let's see what it actually did. Let's look at the data, and then the data's inaccurate, right? And I've gone through this with several projects, right, where it's like, yeah, it's great that it completes the tasks, but the output is complete garbage.
Yeah, unusable garbage.
Right. So there's a difference between like completion and accuracy. And unfortunately, I find that most people using these models or these tools are tasked with completing the task, not completing with accuracy.
Right.
Yes.
Quality.
Two totally different things.
They are different things, and this is why I encourage all criminals who can hear the sound of my voice, please keep using AI to build your tools, because they will be garbage, and they will be easy to spot, easy to track, easy to defend against. They won't work in the way that you expect, and so yeah, I'm incredibly hopeful that the mafia and the Chinese intelligence service like really leans in hard to the AI model, like they really should, because it'll make our jobs a lot easier. I think on defense side, you can use it, and you can use it judiciously, just like anything. Like, I don't think using a spell check makes you a worse writer, generally speaking. I think it makes you a slightly faster writer, and like that's kind of how I'm trying to treat like any LLM-y things that I use. Is like, okay, well, this is like a really cool spell check. It's still on me though. Like I still take responsibility for the thing, and you can't just like ship the first thing, just ship to production. This is why I like agentic AI, which is such a silly phrase, but it is such a pipe dream because it's like
it gets a lot of investment.
It does. It tracks all the money. That's the problem too, is like it's really hard to work in a startup and like kind of talk smack about AI, because it's like, oh, and then meanwhile there's a board meeting and says like, hey, have you tried AI? Have you sprinkled any AI on this? And so like that's the line. And I think cybersecurity is in somewhat of a unique place because, cybersecurity, generally speaking, are full of curmudgeons who like hate everything that's new because it introduces complexity, and complexity is the enemy of security. Whereas like in kind of a normal, startup dev shop where you're just like trying ideas and shipping what works and, we'll fix it later, kind of notion, like they're very into AI because this hits that model perfectly. It's like, well, we'll just ship, the alpha and we'll build an audience and then we'll fix it later. Right. Whereas in security, we're already at the later part. Like everything in security is already later. So I think that like security does have a role in like the larger techosphere of being that kind of like cautionary voice of like, maybe don't put all your eggs in this basket, because it can fall apart pretty quickly when you don't have experts at the helm looking at the thing. And so it's like, I don't know, it's gatekeeping for good when you do that. And it's like, I don't want to like completely automate. I always want to automate myself out of a job. I definitely do, right? I think that is a noble and laudable. I am no Luddite. I love all the automation.
Automate all the things.
Automate all the things. I'm looking forward to our like socialist Star Trek utopia.
Yeah, but automation is totally different than AI.
But it's totally different, right? And this is the talk track that the slick con men who are selling you AI is telling you. It's like, oh, well, you can automate away your entire workforce. It's like, well, yeah. You can't actually, because this goes off the rails real fast.
It's true.
I look at it. I mean, like on the automation side, it's like, like having it create scripts to automate tasks makes a whole lot of sense.
I love it. And I'll read them and I'm like, yep, that looks right. And then, 1 in 10 times it'll be like, oh, and then you're like, passing, just straight arguments from the user to eval. Not great, because you're copying all your stuff from Stack Overflow, and you'll look at the top answer of Stack Overflow, and that's your answer too. And the AI, ChatGPT and Claude, none of them have figured out the trick of like the best answer on Stack Overflow is the second best answer, is the second voted up answer. That is always the better answer.
That's funny.
I love it. I love it. I feel always pretty fortunate to be in this industry because we are always innovating. There's always a reason to go and innovate, right? And like it's just cool meeting like just very interesting people in this industry who have perspectives based on their experience and who are just like kind of, like just in it, right? Just in it all the time and looking at ways to get better, looking at ways to solve problems better.
That's the phase we're in now too, by the way, of like this entire industry didn't exist in certainly in 1980. I want to say even like 1990, it was still all mostly criminals.
Yes.
And so like the people who are founders of like your cybersecurity titans, they are retiring or otherwise, unfortunately, exiting the industry now. And so that first generation of people who didn't have anyone to tell them what to do, like kind of figured it out themselves, very Wild West pioneer, super American, mythology there, right? And incidentally, it's almost entirely Americans. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of Europeans who are good at what they do. But pound for pound, what's the stat? Like United States accounts for about 5% of the world population and about 50% of the software that runs on the internet. So it is a very American, I think, industry, and they're all peeling off. And now we're entering this new phase of people who went to school for cybersecurity, which was not an option until 2010, maybe. I think Purdue had an early one, but like you can count the schools that had a cybersecurity program on like one hand, before 2010. And so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And I think
I have a lot of observations that like people are relearning the same things from 20 years ago.
Well, they're certainly committing the same bugs.
Yeah, they come to a conclusion on something, and it's like, oh yeah, like that was like proven wrong 20 years ago, but like you're gonna try and because you haven't learned. And I think that's some of the challenges. Like you get a lot of new people learning and come to their own conclusions in different ways, including myself. And then you have a lot of curmudgeons that are like smack you overhead.
And the curmudgeonliness, I'm hopeful that we can work past that and like actually do like the wisdom and knowledge transfer to like the new, because people who are like 30 something now, did not spend time as a teenage, mostly I would say, did not spend time as teenage criminals like hacking things to like get free phone calls or whatever, right?
What's a payphone? What's a payphone?
Oh my God. I was watching Speed with my kids a couple years ago because we went to LA and I wanted to watch like an LA movie with them. And I was watching Speed and there's a scene where the villain calls the hero on a payphone and they both went, wait, you could just call them? Like you could just call a payphone and just make it ring. It's like, yep. It's like, how did you pay? How did you pay for the call? It's like, that's the thing. You didn't. So yeah, there are technologies. Technology's awesome. I love it. And I love retro computing and all that. But I do think that we need to like actually go out of our way, people of my generation, need to go out of our way to like, communicate somehow just like the wisdom and experience of like, what was the last time this looked like? I remember when the world was ravaged by worms, like kind of on a weekly basis. It was the golden age of worms with Code Red and Code Blue and Nimda and all that. So, maybe that'll happen again. And the whole notion of like, oh, some services just kind of fall over and die rather suddenly. Like we did all that. We did like when MySpace went away, it was a disaster, but also it was a disaster for like a week and we moved on and we got on the Facebook and it was fine.
We sure did move on.
So anyway, moral of the story is there's nothing new under the sun. I think that's a biblical quote and also a Shakespeare quote. So, and we'll muddle through somehow. But I do think that like that floor of security has steadily increased, and hopefully keeps doing it in the face of new threats like AI. Like AI is just a big ball of threat and opportunity, kind of all mushed into one.
I love that. I love that. Well, what's interesting too, we started to get to the point where, you have like so many interesting perspectives around the table in this ecosystem in cyber. One thing that really stood out to me when we first met down at the Recon 1 was your podcast and your interest in horror movies in particular.
Yes.
Give us an idea of what got you sort of like interested in that, because there's so many different pieces of interest for like every person in cyber, like Patrick and skateboarding, me with my obsession with Oasis and rock and roll. Like give us an idea.
It does seem to be impossible to talk to you, Tom, without the subject of Oasis coming up.
Seeing them in Toronto just like awakened some some creative juice in me, right? And like being my favorite band, I was like, yeah, I'll never see them again because it's been 16 years. They finally got back together, right, and did some cool stuff. But like, give us an idea of your podcast and so we can the listeners can get an idea of like what it like. Do you have specific genres of horror movies that you go into, and what should we be watching?
Oh boy. Okay. So what Tom is alluding to is I have a very dopey podcast. It's called Podsothoth, a Lovecraft Book Club. If you just search for Lovecraft on your podcast app of choice, we tend to be ranked number 9 or 10. So hooray. I am an internationally tolerated horror fiction expert. We get on there. I read some of the stories. We talk about the stories. We do a lot of analysis. I don't know. This is my like special interest. This is my World War II kid experience. Is I care a lot about H.P. Lovecraft, his writings. We talk a lot. By the way, he's like a giant racist monster. We talk about that too, and that's part of it. I think that we should come to, like, as a security person, I'm always ready to like poke holes. And everybody knows this now, that he's a giant racist monster, not just because he's like a white man in the 1920s in America, but like among those people, he was also extremely racist. But regardless, he's also like, it's like him and Poe basically like are the, co-parents of the American horror genre. And so like you don't get Stephen King unless you have Edgar Allan Poe and Lovecraft, right? For example. Halloween is coming up. Oh no, when this releases, Halloween will have just happened.
Yes.
And so you should have watched, I would say the best horror movie I've seen in the last 18 months is Weapons. It's really good. But like a classic horror movie, I am a big fan of getting your kids, I don't know how old your teens are, but if they are at least 13, making them actual teenagers, let them watch like something that's slightly inappropriate for their age, right? So like something like Nightmare on Elm Street, right? Because it's its own classic 80s genre slasher thing, right? Like, and yeah, it's hella violent and there's some sex, but it's like you have to experience that as a teenager or else like you'll never get other horror, right? I withheld Cabin in the Woods from my kids for like 10 years. It's like, no, you can't, I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to mention it, all that. And they both like, I have an array of children. All of them to some degree or another like do like horror movies, but like it took a while. Like I got my kids to watch Poltergeist when they were 9 and 10 and stuff, and that is an incredibly scary movie for a kid.
Very
because
scary.
It's like it's all about children in danger.
I got a funny story here. So last year, my daughter was like, "Hey, I want to go to the movies with my boyfriend," and I was like, "Oh, what movie?" And she's like, "Oh, this movie." I'm like, "What is it rated?" She's like, "R." Like, all right, I'll take you guys. Horror film, right? Yeah. I'm not a big horror person, so I was like, sure, it's rated R. We'll go. We go. I buy tickets. I don't really pay attention. We sit down, and we lasted about 5 minutes. And I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
So what movie is it?
My daughter looks at me and she's like, "Dad, can we leave?" And like that experience is priceless. It was Terrorizer 3.
Oh, Terrifier is that is very new, just like over the top gore.
Terrified. And I was like, well, to some extent, like I feel like a bad parent, but on the other side of it, I was like, dude, to see her make that choice and the look on her face, like she's gonna remember that forever,
right? And it will like flavor every future interaction with anything horror-ish. It's like, well, it's not Terrifier.
That's hilarious, Patrick.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, couple of my electives my senior year were like media studies, film studies. One of the films that my teacher, Ralph Caruso, just an amazing guy, he showed us the original Nosferatu.
Okay.
And when I forget the director who basically the new version of Nosferatu came out last year. Eggers, yes.
Yep.
So, and I said to my wife, I said, this was like kind of influential. I did a project on this. It was a silent movie now with like sound and effects. Like it's got to be good. And so I dragged her to the theaters to go, and I bribed her. I said, we'll go to the new one that's close by, and they serve beer and wine, so you can have a glass of wine during the movie. And she was like, all right, that's fine. So we go in, and we are like 20 minutes into this movie, and she's like, what on earth did you take me to? And this is just grotesque. And I'm like, yes, that's the point. Yeah. And I actually watched it on my way back from Singapore as well too later this year, and I'm like, did I actually like this? And I actually really liked it. I thought it was a cool remake of it.
Yeah, it's a great remake. Eggers is amazing. He did Witch, I want to say.
Oh, that's right.
And that was his first movie, and it was incredible. It was like, it's incredible. If you honestly, like, if you haven't seen it, anything from Eggers is great. Anything from Edgar Wright is great. I think Edgar Wright is like a kind of a sleeper horror director that people don't really know about. Like, he does comedies mostly, right? But he did Shaun of the Dead, which is
amazing.
Top 3 zombie movies of all time. And it's so intricate, and the jokes are intricate, and there's like real stakes and all of that. So good. So, okay. So we're past Halloween, and you want to watch good movies. You're going to watch Nosferatu, the new one, which is fine.
Yes.
It's great. And it's such a love letter to like Count Orlok, and from a movie from 100 years ago, right? Such a love letter to that. And Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead is one of the greatest. Now, not my number one zombie movie. My number one zombie movie is and remains The Girl with All the Gifts. It's a British horror movie. It's about fungus zombies before the HBO show.
The Last of Us.
Last of Us, yes. So it predates that. After the video game, before that miniseries.
Cool.
But yeah, Girl with All the Gifts, so good. And it's like I'm a sucker for horror movies with like children in danger, because I think that is like the quintessential aspect of horror. This is why like It was so popular, right? It's all about kids in danger. Even when they're adults, they're still kids in danger, right? Like that's the message. So yeah, and Poltergeist. Watch Poltergeist again, because it's freaking great.
Yeah, it truly is. I love it. And then of course you've got like the genres of the series of movies, like Friday the 13th, and like you said, Nightmare on Elm Street series. I mean, Freddy Krueger definitely had like the best one-liners ever.
They are so silly to modern teen audiences, because like they're tropey, and they're tropey for a reason, because they got there first, right? And so like watching Halloween is like watching a comedy, like the original, Mike Myers Halloween, right? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. There's like long periods of just like, we need to fill runtime here. That's obvious in retrospect now. But there's just so much going on in those like kind of 80s slasher movies that are just embedded in modern horror today, that it doesn't make it like they just look funny now, right? And so that's why you have to watch all those movies before you watch Cabin in the Woods, which is also like top 5 greatest horror movie ever made. And
it brings it kind of back to like a final point, which would be, you have to get there on your own, right?
You got to do the work.
In a lot of what you do in cyber, right? Like you have to know about like the historical breaches. You have to know about the historical hacks. You have to know about like the first ransomware strain that hit, right? And it's like you build from there, and you learn from there, and then the industry grows from there.
Hard agree.
I think that puts a bow on it.
Yep.
Well, Todd, thank you very much for spending some time with Patrick and I. This was awesome. So good to see you.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing you. I'll be out in Austin in December.
Yep.
And we'll definitely look you up. We've got a bunch of the Vulncheck crew out there as well too. And again, we appreciate your time. That concludes our latest episode of ThreatCon 1. So thank you.
Thank you so much.